Happy Wednesday, learners. We are so excited to see you again. Just to remind you, my name is Miss Abby.
And I'm Mrs. Kraft.
And we are going to continue our English language art lessons for 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. We are anchored this week and next week on narrative writing, narrative reading, narrative elements. Our essential question right behind Mrs. Kraft is, how do authors use narrative elements to write a story? We will keep using that word elements until it just makes a lot more sense. Elements are characters, settings, conflicts, the climaxes of stories. Elements are also the vocabulary that you choose. So every Monday and Wednesday, Mrs. Kraft will introduce some new vocabulary words that we hope you insert into your writing. And she has 2 more great ones for you. All right, have
Thank
fun.
you, Miss Abby.
See you
and
soon.
We'll see you in a little bit. Welcome, learners. So since Miss Abby told you it's Wednesday, it's vocabulary day today. Yesterday you did a word study, and tomorrow we'll do that word study again. So we're going to be sandwiched in between. If you missed the episodes on Monday and Tuesday, they are uploaded on the APS YouTube channel. So check them out. And that way you can catch yourselves up to our narrative writing that we've been working on. All right. So since it's vocabulary day, you know I love to present vocabulary with a picture because that kind of sets it in our mind and gets us thinking about it and creates that image. And when you use those words in your writing, that's exactly what we're trying to do, is create that image or that picture in the reader's mind. Just like when you read the books that you're reading, and they have some fantastic vocabulary words, you can paint a picture in your mind as you read it. So you use that vocabulary both as a reader and as a writer. So let's remind ourselves again of the 2 vocabulary words we learned on Monday, and we're going to learn a couple new ones. So on Monday, we took a look at the word presume. Right, remember the dog? Waggles had his dog dish. It was empty, and he was presuming that his owner was going to give him some food. So our word was presume. And the other word that I absolutely love is mortify. Ooh, mortify. It means kind of scared, embarrassed, something that you do that might not be quite exactly what you intended, and something kind of bad happens. But it's a great word to use in your writing. So today, I wanted to focus back on the board here. And our first word today is an elephant who has taken some water into his trunk. And now, can you see what he's doing? Look at that picture. What's happening? If you said he's blowing water out of his trunk, you're absolutely right. He's giving himself a bath. So elephants can take that water in, and our word is expel. He's expelling that water to wash himself. What other things expel? Have you ever watered flowers with a garden hose? The water comes out of that, doesn't it? So it's expelling water out of the hose. Right. So we expel. What else? Sometimes when we try to think of definitions for words, if we think of synonyms, that helps us get to a definition. So let's think of some synonyms for expel. To push out, that would work. To discharge, to release, those are all synonyms. Remember, synonym is a word that means the same. How about this? We all kind of love to study volcanoes, right? What do volcanoes do when they're hot and the lava comes up? We call it eruption, don't we? The volcano erupts. That's also a really good synonym for expel, because that volcano is going to expel hot lava out down the sides. All right. So the elephant expels water to wash himself. Let's move on over. What I'd like you to do now is get out your writing journals that you created or the notebook that you might have. And remember, we talked about drawing the Freyer model? So we're going to draw what I have on the board over here. This is called a Freyer model. And I know we drew two of these on Monday, and we're going to use 2 more today. So you could draw them 1 on each page, or you could draw 2 right below on the same page if you'd like. You're going to put the vocabulary word in the middle. We're going to come up with a definition, and we're going to use those synonyms that we just talked about. Then we're going to write a sentence. And your sentence can definitely be based on the picture. A synonym, an antonym, which is the opposite, and then an illustration, the fun part, right? Drawing the picture. All right, so let's take our first word, expel. If you were able to draw this chart, and we're going to write it in the middle. Expel. E-X-P-E-L. Say that with me. Expel. Expel. Can you say it low? Expel. Say it really high. Expel. What do you think of? What kind of voice do you use when you see that water coming out of the elephant? What if he shot it at you? Ooh, expelling water on me. That would be pretty cold, I think. So that's our word expel. Now let's think of a definition. What do you think is a good definition for that? Remember we said eject or erupt? The water's coming out of his trunk. He's getting rid of it, isn't he? If a volcano's going to spew lava, it's getting rid of the lava from inside. So the definition I had was to get rid of. But you're welcome to use some of those synonyms that you had. So to get rid of. What about a sentence? Can you write a sentence in your Freyer model that talks about what you're seeing in the picture? Maybe the elephant expels the water from his trunk to wash himself. If you wanted to write a sentence about a volcano, you could also do that. So that sentence is going to go down here. And I'm going to let you do that for some homework, okay? Or some work after our show is over. Let's look at our synonyms. Did you write those down? Erupt, E-R-U-P-T, erupt. What's another synonym for that word? Eject. What about when you take a tape out of if you've done that, it's old-fashioned cassette. If you push the button, the tape pops out. That's eject. E-J-E-C-T, eject. Let's talk about some antonyms. Do you remember what that word means? Say it into your TV. Antonym means did you say opposite? If you did, that's perfect. So if we're going to expel something, it means we shoot it out, right? What's the opposite of that? Maybe to keep it in, to enclose it, right? To receive it instead of expelling it, we take it in. That means opposite, right? And then another thing I'm going to have you do, so you're not rushed, is the illustration. So you can do your illustration after our show ends or while you're watching. If you'd like, once you fill out your Freyer model, you could take a picture of it and send it to our APS Twitter page, which is on the screen, and we will post that so we can see the fabulous work that you're doing at home. All right, so that's our first word, Expel. Let's take a look at another word today. And this is a fun one also. So we have a young man, and he is reading a magazine called Girl Talk. He's been assigned the reading for this magazine by his teacher as homework. So he's taking a girl magazine home, and he doesn't look very happy about it, does he? He doesn't. He's got a funny look on his face. So our word that matches this picture is scoff. Say that with me, scoff. How would you say that if you look at his face? Scoff. S-C-O-F-F, scoff. He's going to scoff because he has to read something he doesn't really want to read. I hope that he finds out it's far more interesting than he thinks. So this is our word scoff. This is our young man. His name is Chaz, and he is not looking super happy right now. So scoff. Let's put that on our Freyer model. Can you write that word in the middle? S-C-O-F-F, scoff. Now, as we look at our picture, let's come up with a definition. What does scoff mean? That's a really tough one, isn't it? To scoff. He definitely looks unhappy, but I'm not sure if that's exactly the definition that we want. He looks like he's a little apprehensive about it. I'm not sure if that's quite the right definition either. Let me share with you the one that I have. Mine is mocking or scornful, because it kind of looks like he's mocking the story a little bit, doesn't it? He's scoffing at it, thinking, I don't know if I really need to do this. So mocking or scornful. And so those could also be synonyms, right? Mock or scornful. Good synonyms for that word, scoff. Here's another fun one, jeer. Have you heard that word? He's kind of jeering. J-E-E-R, jeering at the magazine. He also has some disdain for it, right? I'm not sure if this is going to be interesting. So those could be synonyms. Let's take a look at, let's think about, because I like when we do synonyms, let's move to antonyms. So we have mocking, we have scorn, we have jeering. Let's think about some opposite words to those that are really good words, right? So if he weren't looking like this, he might be smiling, or he might be looking interested. So some good antonyms would be praise. He might think that's a great story, so he's praising it. If he values it, that's another antonym for scoff, to value. Let me spell that for you. V-A-L-U-E, value. That means he thinks it's important. All right. Or how about accept? He's accepting instead of the look on his face that we see. It might be, like I said, it might be an interested look or a smile. That would mean he's accepting of it. He's not scoffing at it, right? The opposite. All right. So we've got our synonyms and our antonyms. I'd like you, after the show is over, to write your sentence. So take a quick mental image of that picture of that boy reading the magazine, of our friend Chaz. And then you can also do an illustration. Has anybody ever scoffed at you? Have you ever scoffed at anybody else? Think about why. And you could record that as an illustration on your Freyer model. Okay. 2 great words today. So keep those in your mind. Complete those Freyer model charts. And then we're going to move on to our story for today. Let me introduce it to you. And by introducing it to you, I want to show you the author, because I think it's so very important to learn about the author of the books that we read. So our author is Duncan Tonatiuh, and he is incredibly interesting because he's from Mexico, and he began by writing comic books. So the things that you're doing with Miss Abby are what this author, this award-winning author, began doing. And the cool thing about that is he began by writing them. He also began by illustrating them. So he illustrated the story. He grew up in Mexico, and then one of his cousins encouraged him to come to the United States and go to school. So he ended up going to college in the United States and became this amazing award-winning author. So his name is Duncan Tonatiuh. You can see his picture up there. And today we're going to read a story by Mr. Tonatiuh called The Princess Warrior. The Princess Warrior. Again, it was written and illustrated by Duncan Tonatiuh, and it was published by Abrams Books for young readers. Once upon a time, there lived a kind and beautiful princess named Itza. Even though she was the daughter of an emperor, she loved to spend time with the people who grew corn in the milpas. She liked to read them poetry, or flor y canto. Suitors traveled from distant lands to woo her. They presented her with rare and lavish gifts, such as quetzal feathers and turquoise necklaces. They would all say the same thing. "You are the most beautiful maiden in the land. Marry me, princess, and you will live in my luxurious palace. You won't have to spend time in the fields ever again." "No, thank you," Itza would reply. She was not interested in any of the suitors or their gifts. One day, a warrior named Popoka came to see her. "Princess, I know you have a kind and beautiful heart, for I have seen you teaching flor y canto to the villagers in the milpas. I don't have expensive gifts to offer, but if you marry me, I promise that I will love you for who you are. I will stay by your side no matter what, as long as Tonatiuh rises, as long as the Senzoli bird sings." Popoka's words were music to Itza's ears. She could hear the honesty in his voice, and she fell in love with him. The emperor did not want his daughter to marry a mere soldier. He wanted her to marry a wealthy and powerful Tlatoani, a ruler. But he knew that Popoka was the best and bravest warrior in his kingdom. The emperor and his people had been at war with Jaguar Claw, the Tlatoani of a neighboring land, for years, and there seemed to be no end in sight. He called Popoka to him. "Popoka," the emperor said, "if you defeat Jaguar Claw once and for all, I will let you marry my daughter, Itza." Popoka and Itza were overjoyed. Popoka gathered his most courageous men and marched to war. Popoka fought numerous battles. He and his men were injured and almost defeated many times. But when the end seemed near, Popoka would always think of Itza, waiting for his return. He would defend himself with a chimali, attack with his makwatwitil, and inspire his men to fight with even more courage than before. Slowly, the tide turned, and Popoka and his men began winning battles. It was clear that they would soon defeat Jaguar Claw. Realizing this, Jaguar Claw revised a plan to steal from Popoka what the warrior cherished most. He bribed one of Popoka's personal messengers. "Tell Itza that Popoka has been killed and offer her this potion, Oakley, to soothe her grief." "Everything is lost, princess," the messenger said sadly. When he arrived at the palace, Popoka and his men fought bravely, but they were defeated and killed. "No, that cannot be," cried Itza. She locked herself in her chamber and wept and refused to eat or speak to anyone. That night, the messenger came to her room. "I know your heart is shattered, as if it were made of obsidian glass," he said. "But take this drink, princess. It will help ease your grief." Itza took the potion and drank it all. Lying down on her petlol, she fell into a deep sleep. The next day, before night fell and the first Sitlali appeared in the sky, Popoka defeated Jaguar Claw. Unaware of the lies the messenger had told, the great warrior and his troops marched back to the palace in triumph, ready to share the good news with the princess and the emperor. But when they arrived, they were met with disbelief. "Popoka," said the emperor, "one of your messengers told us that you were dead." Itza was heartbroken. She took a special okli to ease her pain, and now we cannot wake her. "This cannot be true," said Popoka. "Itza, my beautiful princess, has to awaken." He ran over to her chamber. He kissed her and held her in his arms. He called her name over and over, but Itza did not wake up. "Cool air will surely revive her," Popoka told the emperor. He carried Itza through the throngs of villagers who wept as they passed the milpas, and all through the night to the top of the tepeto. He laid her on a xochitl bed. He knelt down beside her. The cool mountain air did not wake. Soon turned to snow, but still the princess did not wake up. Popoka refused to move. He stayed next to Itza, just as he had promised when he first met her. As long as Tonatiuh rises, as long as the Sanzoli bird sings. In time, where once there was a princess with her true love by her side, two volcanoes emerged. One is known as Itzachicuatl, or Sleeping Woman. The other one is known as Popocatépetl, or Smoky Mountain. Itzachicuatl continues to sleep, but Popocatépetl spews ashes and smoke from time to time, as if attempting to wake his sleeping princess. So the interesting things that I wanted to share with you in this story are, first of all, that our writer, he used some of his own devices when he wrote it. Jaguar Claw does not actually exist, but he created him. So he took a story that was historical and he kind of made it his own. So we call that historical fiction. The other thing that I wanted you to note as we read this story are the transitions that the author uses as he builds the story. And if you remember, transitions kind of mean those words that lead us to the next stage, that tell us that time has passed or that another event is happening. So he starts out the story with once upon a time. That's a great way to start a story. A lot of nursery rhymes and fairy tales start out that way. Once upon a time. But then there are some other transitions, if you notice them as we went through the story. One day. So that happens, we know that some time has passed, right, from the beginning. And he says, one day, now this happens. That's a transition. Another transition, a few pages later, he uses the word slowly, comma. So slowly the tide turned. So he shows you that some time has passed in that battle they were fighting. Another transition is realizing this. And then he uses a comma. Realizing this, Jaguar Claw devised a plan. So he shows you that that is kind of an action that happens. And then another one is that night. So as you're writing, think about these transitions to let your reader know that some time has passed. Maybe your setting has changed a bit, or at least the time of day. And those help your reader, help your story flow. And Miss Abby's going to talk to you about that as you continue writing your comics, as she works with you. Next.
Hi, writers. It's great to see you. Now that we've had a chance to read a wonderful narrative, let's look at this narrative again to think, how can this help us write our narratives? I love to use books to teach me how to write, because after all, the person who wrote this book is a professional writer. That's who I want to learn from. Before we look at exactly how this is written, let's remember our essential question. How do authors, that's you, how do authors use narrative elements to write a story? How do authors use characters, setting, conflict, vocabulary, organization? How do they use that to write a story? Yesterday, we talked a little bit about plot. This is a visual to help you think about how stories are made. Stories start with introductions. This is not too exciting, but it gives the reader lots of information. It tells us who are the characters, when is this happening, where is this happening. It gives us the introduction. It's introducing us to the story. Then writers begin inserting rising action. When I watch movies, I can tell that something is about to happen. That's called a rising action. Then we get to the climax. Mrs. Kraft said yesterday, this is the point of no return. Something happens at this point that cannot be undone. Once you have reached this, then we have the falling action. That explains what happens after this point of no return. And then writers, we need our resolution. That's our ending. Resolutions can be happy. They can have questions at the end, but resolutions are a way of closing our story. So we're going to keep this in mind as we're writing today. What I will do is I will use this book, The Princess and the Warrior, to help me learn how authors use transitions. In my notebook, I have started a new page. Just to remind you, this is my writer's notebook, and I even added to it. It's okay if it's your writer's notebook to keep adding to your cover. Remember, I like to put photographs and stickers and drawings. Yesterday, I voted, so I added my I voted sticker. Inside my writer's notebook, I have my Heart of Writing, my Scar Man. This is a brainstorming activity. And yesterday, I started organizing my writing. But I have a question. Between scene 1, kind of like in a movie, between scene 1 and scene 2, how much time had passed? I hope you took a chance to draw out your Scar story. From scene 1 to scene 2, my question is, how much time had passed? When I'm looking here, I said my story occurred way back in the year 1993. It was spring break, so I was on vacation from school, and my family was headed to the desert. I can even give more information by saying the name of where we went. Akatia. Sometimes I just try my best with my spelling. I can go back and edit later. We went to Akatia Wells. It was a desert area of sand dunes. Do you see how I keep adding? That's called revision, where I look again, I use my vision, and I try and see how I can improve it. I revised the cover of my writing notebook. I didn't just leave it where it was. I thought, how can I make it a little better? So I added a small sticker. That's what writers do with writing as well. Because this book is already published, it can't be revised again without changing the title. But in my writer's notebook, I get to decide how many changes I want to make. Sometimes I can take out things or add more that I think will make my story better. I added the exact location where I went. That's a revision. But today, I want to think about time. How much time has passed from scene 1 to scene 2? Then, how much time has passed from scene 2 to scene 3? The way that we explain how much time has passed, those are called transitions. So on my next page here, I'm going to make a chart, and I would like to invite you to make one as well. Transitions can be words. Transitions can also be phrases. Phrases are a set of words together. They're not a sentence, but it can be 2 words, 3 words, 4 words, maybe even 5 words together. But transition shows us how much time has passed. So I'm going to make a T chart, and I'm going to look through this book for how this author shows that time is passing. Now, the author starts with a phrase, once upon a time. It doesn't tell me when it happened, but that it did happen. That is a phrase. I will add it to my chart. Once upon a time. That is a great fairy tale or fiction, which means fake, fictional narrative beginning. Once upon a time. Let's see what other transitions this author uses. I'm not going to reread the whole story. What I'm doing is I'm using the text to try and find time. I see one right here. Slowly. I will add that to my chart. Slowly is just one word. I will add it here. Slowly. I see another one. Here's a hint. Usually authors of picture books start new pages with transitions. So I always look at how pages begin. This begins with that night. 1, 2. 2 words. So that is called a phrase. That night. I can use these phrases or words in my writing. I'm learning from real writers. I knew it. At the beginning of another page, there is another transition. If I zoom in even more, I know it's a little blurry, but it says the next day. Bring down the light. The next day is a phrase. The next day. I can definitely use that in my writing as well. Let me see if I can find just a few more ones. In time. As I'm writing these, I'm thinking about a few others that I can just think of from other stories I've read or when I tell a story. Finally. Next. I'm going to tell you another one that you probably use often. Then. And then, and then, and then. Be careful not to use this one too much. But I'm going to put a star next to it because it's a great one to use in your writing to let your readers know something else is going to happen. Okay? I'll add more phrases too, like moments later. Oh, I thought of another one. Moments later, seconds later. One year later. These are all transitions of time. They're showing that time has changed. We can use words or phrases. I'll add an S to that, phrases. My job today is to add transitions to my story. I will use a sticky note between. So in my story of when I broke my arm, I start by giving the background. It was 1993. I was on spring break. My family was driving out to Akatia Wells, and it was sand dunes. We were going to have a week of fun and adventure. From scene 1 to scene 2, this happened the next morning. The next morning is a transition. So I will write that here. The next morning. Between, right here. Now, the question is, from scene 2 until scene 3, how much time had passed? Well, the next morning, my older brother says, hey, let's go for a ride. And I say, sure. From the time that we started writing until when we got on the hill, it was probably around 10 minutes. 10 minutes is a transition of time. So I'm going to add that to 10 minutes had passed. 10 minutes had passed. So 10 minutes had passed from scene 2 until scene 3. From scene 3 to scene 4, I use the word suddenly. That is a word that shows transition. From the time that I fell until we got back to our family, it felt like forever. That's not an actual amount of time. It's a feeling. That's also a transition. It felt like forever. Now, lastly, between scene 5 and scene 6, a lot of time has changed because scene 6, my resolution, is today. 20 years had passed between when I had my accident and today. So 20 years later, I have no scar or pain, comma, only wisdom. It's always good to end with what does the character learn? After the climax, after the point of no return, has the character changed? Has the character thought about things differently? Usually. This is my brainstorming. It's my organizing. I need to turn this into actual writing now. I feel like I have a lot of good ideas, and now I need to turn this into writing. Here's how we're going to do it. I'm going to turn scene 1 into writing by telling just the story of scene 1. That's going to be its own paragraph. Then I'm going to start a new paragraph when I start scene 2. I'll start another new paragraph when I start scene 3. Writers, when the time changes, the paragraph changes. Each of these represents one paragraph. I can even expand it into more, but sometimes writers are confused. When do I start a new paragraph? You start a new paragraph when the time is changing. That's one of the rules. So I'm going to start by writing one paragraph. I know I'm ready for a new paragraph when I use the next morning. That's how I'm going to start my second paragraph. My third paragraph is going to begin with 10 minutes had passed. My fourth paragraph is going to start with suddenly. My fifth paragraph will start with it felt like forever. And my last paragraph will start with the transition 20 years later. I like when I already know how I'm going to start each of my paragraphs. It makes me not so worried and not so intimidated by the blank page. Also, I can always go back and revise. I can always go back and add more. I can take away things because I'm in charge of my writing. So, now that you have your SCAR story in scene form, let's start writing. I have my transitions to help me. But when I start a new page, it doesn't have to be perfect at all. I can go back and work on my spelling. I can go back and add more detail. But I need to start. So this is going to be called a draft. A draft means, nope, I am not ready to publish it in a book yet. A draft is a beginning. So let's start with our first draft. Now, in the book today, it said once upon a time. This is a real story, so it doesn't make sense to start with a fairy tale beginning. Instead, I'm going to use details. This is going to help me write my first paragraph. Instead of once upon a time, I'm going to start with the year. I love when writers are very specific about their time. So I'm going to turn to my draft. I will indent and say, way back in 1993, my family headed to Akatia Wells for a desert vacation. It was spring break. And we were excited for a week of, what do I need to add? Looking at scene 1, a week of dirt bikes, camping, and fun. I need to introduce my characters. The 5 of us. My mom, comma, dad, comma, and my 2 brothers, Jesse and Jacob, all happily arrived at our campsite. I'm going to stop there. I think I've told a lot of background. Once I finish writing my first paragraph, what I like to do, this is a strategy, I use it all the time. It's called magic headphones. Magic headphones is a way to reread your writing, to look for any mistakes, or if you left anything out. This is how you do magic headphones. You need 2 fingers and 2 ears. What I do is I go ahead and I plug one ear, then I plug the other ear. And it kind of sounds like I'm underwater right now. I probably sound normal to you, but try it. Plug your ears and say, hello, hello, hello. It sounds different. I use magic headphones when I reread my writing to see if I made any mistakes. There's something magic about hearing your writing out loud. You can find more mistakes that way. You can find things that you left out that way. So I'm going to use my magic headphones to read my first paragraph. Way back in 1993, my family headed to Akatia Wells for a desert vacation. It was spring break, and we were excited for a week of dirt bikes, camping, and fun. The 5 of us, my mom, dad, and my 2 brothers, Jesse and Jacob, all happily arrived at our campsite. I found a mistake. At our campsite, the campsite that belongs to us. I love using magic headphones. It helps me find little ways that I can improve my writing. Now, I don't have time for all of my draft, but I know that my next paragraph is going to start with the next morning. So I'm just going to write that. I will go down to the next line, indent, the next morning. And now I will describe what happened in scene 2. I would love to see your writing, how you use your scenes, and you transition them to writing. Tomorrow, we will continue writing. We will continue revising so that we have a SCAR story. Tonight in your reading, look for transitions. Tonight in your reading, look for how writers use words and phrases to show that time is changing. You can do that in picture books, chapter books too. In picture books, look at the first word on the page. In chapter books, look at how new paragraphs or new chapters are beginning. Make a list. Words and phrases. See how time is changing in stories. Sometimes it goes backward, sometimes it goes forward. But characters do not stay still. They are moving, and it's transitions that help characters move forward or go back to give us more information. I had so much fun writing with you today. I hope you share your examples with us. Thank you so much for learning at home with APS.